Hello and welcome to our weekly Parsha Shir. This series is instead of the Alshich, which we've been doing for the last 2 years. In case you've missed the last two or three, we've moved over to the Torah of the great rabbis of Kelm and the Kelm tradition, which is Reb Yerucham. This week we're going to be quoting Reb Yerucham and Reb Yerucham's greatest Talmidim, Reb Shlomo Wolbe. So he never learned in Kelm, he learned Mir. However, it's as a Talmud of Reb Yerucham, I think we can fairly include him in the Kelm universe and orbit, and of course Rabbi Dessler. So that's where we're going this week. Interestingly, what we're about to say is, or what we're going to examine, is the holiness of a place, the holiness of Eretz Yisrael, and Rabbi Yerucham, who is going to be the launch of the Shir, or rather where we launched this year, it's in Pashas Chayei Sara. The question is, why does he concentrate and focus on the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael and Chayei Sara? It's interesting, of course, when Avram is trying to get a burial place, it's, of course, in Eretz Yisrael. And he says to the then rulers of Hebron, I'm a stranger with you, right? So please give me, he appeals, please have a burial place here. But it's his land, but it's not his land yet. And that's critical. It's not yet been taken by Klal Yisrael, which comes after Yetzias Mitzrayim. It's not yet got the full Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael. So maybe that's why he's talking about it. I'm not really sure. However, what he has to say and where that's going to lead us in the orbit of Kelm is, I think, hopefully very interesting. As usual, I've had a very, very flattering email from a Rov who wants to dedicate the share. I'm afraid I'm going to press before I've received the details of who he wants the share dedicated to. So we'll do it next week or the week after. So this week, we'll keep it in our traditional hope for the Refuah Shalema of Oria Chaim ben Chani Yehudis. That's the little baby waiting for the lung transplant. Refuah Chaim ben Sara, the dear young man with the young family who needs Refuah. Cheskel Yehuda ben Yenta, cousin in Eretz Yisrael, and my dear wife Ita Rivka Basima Esther, who, as you know, is struggling to recover fully from a complete knee operation. And sadly, she now needs a complete shoulder replacement as well. So she's been going through a tough time. We've been going through a tough time. Why leave myself out of this? Anyway, so that's that. Okay, so basically, in Reb Yerucham's commentary on the Torah, Das Torah. Now, there's two sections here. There's one that's, as it were, just on the Psukim, and then there's sort of essays, which is where we're going to, and why I said that it's strange that he focuses on Eretz Yisrael. So in Chayei Sara, in his Chelek HaMamorim, when he's giving little shiurim based on the Seder, as opposed to a deep analysis of the Psukim, Soid Eretz Yisrael, the Soid HaGosh. So he wants to talk about the fundamental nature of Eretz Yisrael and the mechanism that leads to expulsion from Eretz Yisrael. Fine. Now, we're not going to go into everything he says. There's so much there that I really have to leap off from the page and just explain where he's going in an element of his mimer as opposed to the whole thing. It would just be too much. Anyway, he says the following interesting thing. Lama hatzadikim nimshul ba'olam hazeh. What are tzadikim likened to in this world? This is a Gemara in Kedushin Daf Mem Amud Beis. What are tzadikim likened to in this world? And the answer is le'ilon shekula oimed b'mokum tahara. It's like a tree, and the tree is planted in a place of tahara, of kedusha. And the branches go over into a place of tumah. That's what the Gemara is talking about there. If you cut off the branches, the core of the tree is still in a holy place. The converse is not the same. Rishaim are like a tree planted in a place of tumah, negativity. Cut off the branches that do go over to the holy place, and you're still left with something which is fundamentally planted in a negative place. So it's a bit obscure, but let's see where we can go from that. So he says, this statement of the rabbis in the Gemara is explaining Hakol al Inin Hanatiyah, that everything follows the where something is rooted. So the metaphor of the tree being planted in the place of holiness, it's planted, better translated as rooted in a place of holiness, because everything, the message is, it really depends on where a person, where a thing is rooted. We have got the custom, and it's not wrong, we have got the custom to think about Olam HaBa and what heaven, or the world to come literally, Olam HaBa, shu begeder a schar shekibel sham. If you talk about Olam HaBa, that's the place where you're going to earn the reward for all the good things that you've done down here. Even though, says Reb Yerucham, that's right, I mean, that's certainly true. But that's not the fundamental of Olam HaBa. That's not the essence, the complete essence of what it means Olam HaBa, or what it means heaven. Soid Olam HaBa, hu shah Odam hu ben Olam HaBa. The essence of this concept of Olam HaBa is that a person is a ben Olam HaBa. A person is a son of that concept, a manifestation of that concept. This is deep stuff, and a very obviously unique take on this. Is a ben Olam HaBa Haina Natia Olam HaBa. He's been planted, he's transplanted from Olam HaBa here. In very simple terms, I think what Reb Yerucham is saying is like this: it should be that the values that would earn you Olam HaBa, you obviously, it's almost a circular argument. If you're an exemplary Jew down here, you won't earn Olam HaBa. But that means that Olam HaBa you're an exemplar of it. When you are down here, Olam HaBa should be tasted, sniffed, witnessed, seen through you. You're a ben Olam HaBa. You bring Olam HaBa down here. It's the concept of the Jewish people. We're supposed to be an inspiration to the rest of the world, a light unto the nations, etc., etc. We are supposed to manifest the behavior of Olam HaBa. A very obvious example is that the Yud Gimel Midas, dealt with extensively by the wonderful Sefer Tamar Devora, Moshe Cordevero's Sefer, is a whole map to chart a course for us to copy the behavior of Hashem in this world. So the Jewish people, as it were, become exemplars of the 13 midot, the 13 character traits of Hashem. So that's what Reb Yerucham starts off saying here. Fine. So far, so good. That it's the role of Jew to bring Olam HaBa to Olam Hazeh, to be an exemplar of Olam HaBa in Olam Hazeh. Fine. So let's move to one of his greatest Talmidim, Reb Shlomo Wolbe. So Reb Shlomo Wolbe, in his Sefer, now if you think I was going to say Ali Shor, for those of you who are familiar with Reb Wolbe's wonderful Sefer, his classic, his magnum opus. It's not, it's the Sefer, which is called Das Shlomo, and the subtitle is Mamori Yemei Rotzin, so it's on Elul. So let me read to you a little bit of what his Talmud has to say, which you will see fits very, very nicely with the concept that we're exploring here. And again, it has the signature of Kelm. He quotes here a Medrash Rabbah, and the Medrash Rabbah says this: "Vayivka b'malkum." This is when Yaakov Avinu comes to what's the place that's going to have be the location of the Harabayas, and he comes to that place. Reb Huna b'shem Reb Ami Omer. Reb Huna, in the name of Reb Ami, says, "Ma mechin shemoy shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu." Why is it that the Korin Isa Mokum? What is it that V'yivka b'Mokum, he bumps into the place, but Mokum is also the name of God. It's one of the names of God is the place. Why is God known by the name which means place? It does seem a very strange thing to term to use for God. And the answer, he says the Medrash, or says from Huna in the name of Rabami, Shu Makom Shalom. The reason is because God is the place of the world. Ve'in olam makomo. But this is not his place. Ugh, well, that's a very difficult concept. As the world was created by God, yesh mi'ayin, something from nothing, as it were, God creates a place, creates a reality, a dimension, if you like. Shu makoim olam. You could translate it as he's the source of this world, but not that the world is, as it were, his place, makomo. Madik Siva says, "Hine mokam iti hari kadosh baruch makom she'olam ve'ina olam shemakame." Hashem is the place of the world, the venue in which the world of the universe is hosted, perhaps. Ve'in olam makame. That's very, very obscure, but let's see if we can read on in these deep ideas. And of course, Reb Yerucham is profoundly deep, as of course is Reb Shlomo Wolbe. I think they are very, very similar, incidentally, in approach. Rabbi Dessler, I have to tell you that one of the, I'm friendly with one of the great grandsons of Reb Yerucham. And when I mentioned Rabbi Dessler as also being of the Kelm school, he was, oh, no, Rabbi Dessler went in a totally different direction. Not so sure myself, but certainly a distinctly different direction. Totally not so sure, but never mind. But Roy of Makaimus, Shatira Masafras Begilu Shekina. So now Reb Shlomo Wolbe says, in the majority of places where the Torah talks about Hashem revealing himself to Avram, Yitzchak, whoever it is, then it will tell you also the place. Whenever it is that he's a revelation of God, it tells you the place. Why? Hashem went from the place which he'd been speaking to him there. It mentions a particular place that the revelation of God, the communication by God to one of his Nevi'im occurred. Nira ki mokam hagiloi ma'akabas hagiloi, because it tends to suggest that the place itself would either have a negative effect to prevent the revelation taking place or a positive role in allowing the revelation in which God appeared to somebody to take place. It's absolutely essential. That place is essential to the fact that there was a revelation there. It's not accidental. It's fundamental. We've got to understand, so why is there a relationship between a geographic location to Hashem, which obviously Hashem is above geography and the laws of the physical world that he created. Harry, not only that, because Reb Shlomo Wolbe continues, he says that there seems to be, obviously, a hierarchy when it comes to Kedusha and a separation when it comes to place, geography, location between Eretz Yisrael and that which is generally fitted into just one other category, Chutz La'aretz. Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. There's Israel and there's outside Israel. And when you come to Israel, there is again a distinction between Ben Shar Eretz Yisrael and Yerushalayim. There's a distinction between the land of Israel and Yerushalayim. That's the pinnacle. Hari Habayis to Kedushas Azara ad Kodesh Kedoshim. And when you get to Yerushalayim, then there's again a hierarchy of Kedusha, Harabayas, and then the Azora at Kodesh Kedoshim to the Holy of Holies, where of course the tablets, broken and whole, were located inside the ark. Why should there be a hierarchy? Why should one have relatively greater holiness? Doesn't the Pasuk say the whole world is full of the Kedusha of Hashem Yisbarach? How could there be a place which is more holy? God made the whole thing. Why could there be a distinction, a suggestion that a certain geographic location is more holy and inclines to holiness and maybe gives holiness to another place which it doesn't do it so much, or maybe not at all? Because I'll say in this expression, this medrash we looked at before that we started with, it seems very obscure. He says, that there is a place that that this world is not the place of Hashem. Kelm, there it seems to be there is no geographic place which demands a revelation of God. So how could this be such a concept that one place is holier, that a holier place to connect you to God? It seems to be that there is everything should be equal. God made the whole thing. This is not his place. This is not his the world is again, I'll read the original. He is the source, or he's the place in which the worlds rest. But there's nothing in this world that is his place. Interesting. Because this world is not God. Olam HaBa might be more of God. And as we said, we started off from Reb Yerucham saying it's the job of a Jew to bring the heaven to the earth. I know this is quite deep, and it's going to get deeper, I'm afraid. So I hope you're feeling, despite the fact it's the end of the week, still a little bit with some mental energy still left. Let me read a little bit more. V'nira ki kol habriya hagashmias, because the entire physical world that God created, our world, echocha el alukus mitzad echod. From one point of view, one side of the coin, it as it were, testifies, manifests God. And from another aspect, then this world is, instead of being something that testifies to God, is something that denies God. You can't see God. The Hebrew word, Rabbi Dessler famously points out, for world is olam, ayin vav lamed mem, which comes from the three-letter root ayin lamed mem, hide or hidden. This world essentially conceals God. You can't see God in this world. So it's various statements that talk about places being manifestors of God in the world or holiness in the world, and yet other places which seem to say it's not his place at all. You can't see God, or if you do see God, it should be equal. So we seem to be going a little around in circles, but way around in circles. However, this last bit here is very, very interesting. He says, it seems to be that I'll read that line again. From one side of the coin, the whole world testifies to the existence of God. King David says, you can see the designer through the design. But the other, but on the other side, it's a barrier stopping you seeing God. I mean, after all, somebody who is a Ben Olam HaBa instead of a Ben Olam HaBa is somebody who's completely sunken into all the gashmis, all the hedonism, physical pleasures of this world, where you're not going to see God. Let's pursue that. Let's pursue that idea of this world being a place which is a barrier against God. And then I have to turn to Rabbi Dessler. And Rabbi Dessler, in page 162 of Chelik Daled of Michtam Mediyahu, here, he says the following intriguing thing. So let me read this to you. This is just a little paragraph. And again, we're doing very deep thing. We're going very deeply this week. Every concept, every reality that we perceive that's outside of us, we become aware of it through the activity of our brains. Gam Regashaseno, and our regish, our feelings, our emotions, if you like, also flow through the brain. And he says the King Kosob Sefer Tanya, and the Sefer Tanya says the exact same thing. But even the heart is, I think the heart here is the euphemism for emotions, comes from the brain. And then he says, listen to this, but it wasn't always like that, was it? I'll repeat this because this sounds very, very strange. Everything we perceive, everything we understand, everything we know is a consequence of having a brain, which is able to see things, understand things, and process them, store them as memories, so that we can apply what we've understood in the world and use it for our benefits. But he says, but that wasn't always the case. It wasn't always the case that everything we understood, everything we knew, was because we had a brain. Was it? Here's a good moment to pause and have a ponder on that one. Well, very quickly, no. Of course it wasn't. The Gemara famously says, Nida and Daf Lamdam at base. Malamenes lono shekol odam beyosa uber b'mei imai. It teaches us when we were still a little uber, a little fetus, inside our mother's womb, about that size, the size of a finger, less than a finger. Then it famously says, Soifa omabet misoifa onamat soifa. Then Hashem shows us from one end of the world to the other end of the world. And not only it teaches us the angel inside our mother's womb teaches us all of the Torah. Now, as Ben Bagbag says in Pirkei Avos, turn the Torah over and turn it over again, because everything's in it, and we were taught all of the Torah, i.e., everything in our mother's womb. Then that was before we had a brain. It's only later the brain functions and becomes independent when we are born and open our eyes. But probably understood all that knowledge when we were inside our mother's womb. When we were born, of course, then apparently the angel gives us a little hit on the top of the lip. It's supposed to be symbolized by that indentation, a metaphor for he wipes the slate clean. We don't remember it anymore. Question, therefore, what's the point? If the file is going to be wiped clean, what's the point of having it written in the first place? The answer is it's easier to relearn something than it is to learn in the first place. That would seem to be the answer. I always, when I was a young man, saw this, and God takes us with Seifa, Mabit, Miseifa, Adamat Seifa. He takes us and shows us from one end of the world to the other end of the world. I kind of thought that Hashem took us and indeed took our little souls and showed us the entire world. He started, of course, with Scotland, and then showed us all the wonderful mountains, the valleys, the lochs, the lakes, and the mountains, etc., the bends. And then he would take us to France, perhaps, and then Switzerland, and all, shows us the whole world. But that doesn't make any sense, because it says, it shows you from Misoifa Olambat, Soifai, from one end of the world to the other end of the world. But obviously a circle has got no beginning and no end. A ball doesn't have a beginning. So what does it mean that it shows you from one end of the world to the other end of the world? And the answer is, it's from the beginning of time to the end of time. It's the line of a timeline. When you were in your mother's womb, you were shown the whole of time. So you were given all the knowledge. You understood all the knowledge that would be able for any one to gather, for all of us to gather collectively. Then you were taught that in your mother's womb before you had a brain. You were shown the whole of human history before you had a brain. Therefore, he says the following thing. And it didn't come through the brain. Ella hasogas benimis min hashwas al hanepesh beli hagvolas man umokam beli harafa beli ensai. It came to the soul, to your soul, all that knowledge imprinted, as it were. Have you imprinted the soul? I'm not sure, but you get the analogy. On our souls, we had all that intact within us. Because when you come to outside the world, comes the angel and wipes the slate clean, as we said before. Now the question is, and why is that? So we can choose to relearn everything we've got. But here's the question. If that is the case, what is the role of this world? What is the role of our brains? When you come into this world, what happens to all that knowledge you had before? The answer is it's wiped clean, as we mentioned before. This world, therefore, is a barrier stopping you seeing all that you could see when you were inside your mother's womb, because you saw it from a spiritual point of view. You're a soul. You're still a soul, even though you're inside your mother's womb. You're more attached to heaven than you are to earth. You've got a heavenly perspective. When you come into this world stops you seeing it with the clarity you saw it before you had a brain, before you were physical, before you come into this world. In other words, the role of the brain, the role of the world, is to stop you seeing. And then you've got to fight to see it again. Olam, from the root Elim, meaning to be hidden. Now that takes us back. Let's go straight back to Reb Shlomo HaBa. And Reb Shlomo HaBa, to continue where we broke off, he says, therefore, I'll read that first line we started with. From one point of view, you can see God if you look at the world, and from another point of view, it's a mechitza. It's a barrier stopping you seeing God, which I think through that Rabbi Dessel we just explained very nicely. Because the physicality of the world and the physicality of ourselves, is the natural blockage that stops us and cuts us off from spirituality. And then he says, and there are certain places which have a lesser blockaging effect than other places, which do not create the same barriers to a perception of spirituality, of holiness. Places where you can touch it more, perhaps at the top of a mountain. Reb Shamshon Hirsch often used to say to members of his Kehillah, one day you will stand in front of the Beis Din Shemana, of course, the heavenly court, to give an accounting of yourself. And the heavenly voice will say to you, did you go and see my Alps? The wondrousness of the Alps, I mean, it's absolutely astonishing. I don't know if you've ever been to Switzerland, or if you go to Switzerland to see the Alps, of course, you can do it via Germany, Italy, France, or Switzerland. But that huge mountain range, it's stunning. And I speak as somebody who's Scottish, we've got nice mountains as well, but the Alps are breathtaking. There are some places on the earth which really inspire you to feel small. And when a person feels small, there's room for something big, i.e. God. Then you let God in. So he says, there are certain places in the world which break through to a degree the barrier of that the world operates, stopping you seeing God. And then we've obviously solved our contradiction. Some suggestions of the world being places in the world which are holier. The holiest place that does that is Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Yisrael is a place where a person has the ability to see, as it were, heaven. And we start off by saying that you're supposed to be a persona of heaven in this world. It's easier to be that persona of heaven in this world in Eretz Yisrael. But I think I'll finish this off, this paragraph, because I think it's beautiful to read. So again, yesh mo'amokom, there is certain places, says Reb Shlomo HaBa, asher chamora yoser adayin yoser b'noach lizbatel. There are some places where their physicality is more seductive and leads you to this world. Instead of being blown away by the Alps, perhaps just another part of the world, which is indeed extremely beautiful, but would encourage you to engage in all the pleasures of this world. It's interesting that somebody pointed out, I don't know how unfair this is, I've not gone through it properly in my mind, that Jewish communities built on the beach, on beaches throughout the world, whether it's in California or wherever, tend not to thrive. I'm not just talking about people walking about half naked on the beach, creating a negative atmosphere, but maybe because suntanned and all that sort of stuff, you're there for the pleasures of this world, maybe that negates against the spiritual. Whereas when you see a mountain, it inclines you towards the spiritual. But some places which are difficult, perhaps the beach story. Baal Chomeris Rabba, which are very physical, or human physicality and hedonism and desires are fulfilled in those places. It's very hard to get rid of that. And some places you just don't feel the gashmis. Fine. So again, there's a place which the place of the world is God, but God not necessarily in this world. In other words, we won't, even though God made the whole thing, there are certain places in this world where you don't feel that. You do feel it most in Eretz Yisrael. Which takes us back to where we started, Reb Yerucham. So now I've got to read to you from Reb Yerucham, who, with his own introduction, then leaps into a paragraph which is tremendously interesting. He wants to talk about the greatness of Eretz Yisrael. This Eretz Yisrael, which in this week's Parsha is not yet the possession of Avram Avinu's, he's got to struggle to get it. And we live in a special time where we don't have to struggle to get it. When we're able to go, get a jet, I'm hoping to do it in January, and go and see my children and grandchildren, maybe give shir in Eretz Yisrael, which for me is the ultimate schus. Anyway, from that says Reb Yerucham, and we're back incidentally. Das Chochel Musser. It's easier to understand the kedusha of Eretz Yisrael. Well, Eretz Yisrael tasepes mokaim koich nechbed b'Torah. Eretz Yisrael has a unique place in the whole of the Torah. Kemat kol Torah kula mola me Eretz Yisrael. It's as though the entire Torah is full of Eretz Yisrael. Well, Sekas Eretz Yisrael and discusses Eretz Yisrael. Its laws are so many laws, many Torah laws are unique and specific to Eretz Yisrael. The Sefer Mishnah Torah, not only that Sefer Mishnah Torah, the book of Devarim, but Daber Kemat Rag al Eretz Yisrael. It addresses itself almost uniquely to Eretz Yisrael. The Eile Hadvarim, and these are the things. Omer Chazal, etc. And Rashi says, "Omer lehem Ra ma garamtem la'atzmechem." When Moshe Rabbeinu says that to the Jewish people, then he says, "Look what you caused yourselves. You could have got there quite easily just 1 year after leaving Mitzrayim, and you blew it. And because of a sin, you weren't able to go in to achieve Eretz Yisrael for 40 years. And then he says something which is astonishing. Moshe Rabbeinu b'loshon l'spal tefillas communion eschanam. And when Moshe Rabbeinu in the Parsha of Eschan, the second Parsha, of course, in Devarim, when I pleaded ve'eschanan, Eschanan's got the gematria and the numerical value of 515, and that's the many prayers Moshe Rabbeinu addressed to be able to go into Eretz Yisrael. And here, I'd never thought about this before. Here's a wonderful Reb Yerucham insight. And his prayer was just to set foot in Eretz Yisrael, to walk into it maybe 2 or 3 feet. That would have done for him. That would have been enough. There'd be something which he could have achieved spiritually by being Eretz Yisrael just a few feet. Doesn't have to go and see the whole thing. Just a few feet would have been enough. And he sadly was not able to do it. And he rises, he just, all of his prayers, at least he got to see it. The Kena Obas Kedoshim, and of course the Obas, Avram Avinu Levsham Nishum, Avram Avinu also slipped up when it came to B'ma'ida. How do I know that I'll get it? He wanted his children to be promised and be guaranteed Eretz Yisrael. Sherod Salah have to is born of She's Kaim Eretz Yisrael. They wanted a promise that my children will always live in Eretz Yisrael. V'hunei Kodesh Baruch Avtiach Avram Avinu Eretz Yisrael v'Kein Achachak Yitzchak. Surely, and he promised it to Avram Avinu and Yitzchak and Yaakov. The in Shoyte Sheba'olam. Says Rabbi Yerucham, surely there should be nobody so insane or foolish. All this ambition, all this work that the greats of Klal Yisrael, Moshe and Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov, and wanted for the children was just to just be a state, a Jewish state, so that we can be like everybody else? Not at all. The Pelagshim, Abram's concubines, their children went on in Jewish tradition to get their own countries. Japan, China, Far East, these sorts of things. Apparently all somehow or other started from from Avram Avinu's children. But that's not what we're about. What we're about, Reb Yerucham goes on to say, an astonishing thing, that the Midbar and getting the Torah, that's the stage before getting Eretz Yisrael. The fact that we had to be 40 years in the desert before we could get to Eretz Yisrael was to get to the stage where we were before we blew it, making the Egel Azov, which is the stage of getting the Torah. But what came after getting the Torah was Eretz Yisrael. Not Eretz Yisrael, where it says in Eretz Yisrael where it's the 4th biggest arm manufacturer and exporter in the world. I made that up, but it's up there, these sorts of figures. Nor even in the Eretz Yisrael is the startup nation of the world, which is fabulous, of course, but that's not the big thing. Or medical breakthroughs from Eretz Yisrael, that's all great. But that's not what it's about. As he started off by saying that we're supposed to bring a taste of heaven to the world. It's something I heard Lord Jacobus, going back three chief rabbis of England before, famously said, what we want to be famous about is that we bring ethics and morality to the world. Or to use Reb Yerucham's phrase, a little taste of heaven to the world. It's where are we rooted, which is where we started. Are we rooted in heaven or rooted down here? The success of Eretz Yisrael, the success of a Jewish state, is when Jewish people show the world and give the world a taste of heaven. And that should be the ultimate ambition of Eretz Yisrael. It's what Abram wants, and it's what he begs to have a little bit of to bury Sara. It's what Jewish people as a whole should want, to be a nation that truly inspires the ethics and the morals of the whole of mankind. I shall look forward to seeing you next week, and I wish you all a very, very good Shabbos.